What is up, everyone? Beck here from StartingStrongman.com with another Strong Talk Q&A, and today I want to talk about how to pick the right assistance exercises for you. If you watch my weekly training clips, you'll notice that I get some questions. If I got one this week. Do you still do the Z press? The answer is right now I don't. I've had great success doing that lift in the past, and it's helped me, and I still use it with a lot of clients. But why do I not currently use it? Well, I'm just at a different phase where I don't think it's quite the best lift for me. I'm not really looking to add more volume in that. After tearing my bicep in December and just kind of taking some time off and regrouping, I'm basically rebuilding myself, and I have a lot of a big strength imbalance in my left to right shoulder, which when on my pressing, which one's stronger, and just instability in the shoulder is very bad. So I've been doing different exercises like one arm dumbbell strict overhead press, a wide grip behind the neck strict press, kind of it's referred to as a Klokov press sometimes, wide grip, stuff like that with lightish weight, and just making sure everything's kind of firing the same, and there's a balance. So if I needed to use something like the Z press again, or I used it in a client, why would I use that exercise? Well, I'm going to use that to target the specific needs and weak points of the athlete. And I think it's generally helps people with their press because they haven't learned how to brace through the core, especially with something when going where they might have been doing some barbell overhead movements and stuff, and then they go to starting to press a log. So when they're going to press a log, it's a lot harder to stabilize. It's way out in front of you. Your core, your stability kind of, midline stability kind of goes out the window. What the Z press does is if you cannot stabilize your core and keep extremely tight, you're screwed. So just in that, it puts you in such a bad position that you have to learn how to overcome it, which is going to really help you to apply those same principles when you are then in a good position or a better position, like actually having your feet not out in front of you and you're standing, which is a better position. This is also going to be the case where if someone's moving from doing a lot of seated overhead pressing to standing, they're also going to have that problem where their shoulders are, and their upper body is actually strong enough to press it, but they're not strong enough to stabilize it, where extra, ab core work, stabilization exercises, and stuff like the Z press come in handy. Of course, you can do stuff like planks, ab rollouts, etc., but actually learning to stabilize while pressing is perfect, and that's why the Z press works well. And you can't cheat. Like if you see a lot of strict presses in strongman training, but with that, I don't really see how it's putting you in such a bad position that you have no choice but to overcome it. So for me, that is not the main emphasis right now, so I'm not going to use that. So you have to look at what is this actually working, what are your weak points, what are your imbalances, and then program your assistance work accordingly. And you have to also, this is going to change greatly depending on if you're prepping for a show, if you're in an off season, or if you don't even really compete in anything and you just like lifting weights and being kind of strong and kind of jacked. It's going to have very different, there's going to be a lot of differences in how you're going to approach your main lift and your assistance lifts. So let's say on the deadlift, you don't even know how, people will say that they have weak hamstrings and glutes, when that may be true, but the real problem is that they can't even fire their hamstrings and glutes when performing a deadlift. So the best way to overcome this is to make sure that you engage your hamstrings and your glutes when performing normal deadlifts. So your assistance work, sometimes you have to fix your main work instead of just throwing a bunch of assistance. Like you can do all the glute ham raises in the world you want, all the stiff leg deadlifts, all, you know, the leg curls, whatever you want to get stronger hamstrings and glutes, etc. But if you don't actually engage the muscle in the main lift, it's not going to do anything. I had this problem for a long time, and I really had to go back and rework everything, starting my deadlift completely over. Which, if you don't use your hamstrings and glutes in the deadlift, you're probably going to end up like having some back injuries like me. So I really emphasize to be safe and keep that in mind. So how did I fix that? Well, when I was actually deadlifting, if I didn't feel that tension at the bottom in my hamstrings, and I knew that once the bar wasn't past my knees, I didn't shove my glutes forward and squeeze to finish the lift, that was my max for the day. Even if I could put myself in a weirder position to use a lot of low back and get, you know, my strong quads to get it off the floor, I know that that's going to lead back to injury, and that's just my ego saying that, you know, just figure it out and don't worry, because you don't want to go back and be using less weight than you were. That's your ego talking. It's good because it's probably somewhat of a motivator of why you do this in the first place, but you have to be smart also. But so how did I fix that? I did, you know, I paid attention. I changed my main lift to make sure that, okay, that's my technical max. Just like, so if you're doing if you want to apply it to the same thing we're talking about overhead, if you have an overhead event and you have to do something where you're like here and then your core starts rocking and then you get under it, then you know that you are at the point where you might have like a 300-pound, you know, pair of legs. They're good for a 300-pound push press, but your core is good for 270. So you need to get your core a little stronger. That's going to be your technical max for the day, is then 270 until everything else is brought up. So even with like the shoulder stuff to fix the instability and hamstrings, what I found that works really well is not the assistance exercises that you do after the main lift, but how you warm up to do the main lift. Right now, I do a lot of activation work in the hamstrings and glutes, and single leg work to fix imbalances, and pretty much have every single one of my clients doing the same thing. One leg RDLs, one leg glute bridges sometimes, lots of hip circle work. I really like that product by Mark Bell, Slingshot. Mine, I need to buy a new one because it's all torn up, but yeah, the hip circle works great to actually make sure that your glutes and hamstrings and stuff are they're primed, they're ready to actually deadlift, squat, etc. Where, you know, a lot of us spend a lot of time sitting down and, you know, just sitting down and sitting down. So which is horrible for your hamstrings. I think that's one of the reasons why I had these problems in the first place, is because my old job, I drove like 1,200 miles a week. And then in between that, I'd be, you know, just doing office work and stuff. So I was constantly sitting down, and you can't get something to grow and get stronger if it never even activates, and I had no ass. So, you know, it caught up with me. And now, you know, a long time later, it's all working out. But so pick some light-ish exercises to warm up the areas you don't have a problem, that you have a problem with for the main lift. And I think you will find a lot of benefit. And when picking your assistance exercises, put an emphasis on, you have to have, so everything stays well-rounded and you're working through multiple ranges of motion, so you don't further develop those imbalances, or you don't further develop more imbalances, and you know, you keep everything equally getting stronger at the same time. Also, one reason why stuff like isolation work is so good, it works so well, is because you can't just keep doing heavy taxing compound lifts over and over. You just don't recover like that. So as great as it would be, like, oh, so the deadlift, you know, puts on tons of muscle mass and stuff, you know how hard after a heavy deadlift workout, how you feel the next day. So you can't, it's not, most people are not going to be able to get away with deadlifting every day. So you might have to do some lower volume work, you know, some less stressful, more isolation work to get more actual work on your hamstrings and glutes. God, I said work so many times. And that's another case where something like the Z press comes in handy, because it's such a, you're putting yourself in such a bad position that you're going to use less weight, but you're still getting more work in the shoulder and the upper back and all of the surrounding areas you need to get a bigger press, but it's not going to be as taxing on your body because it's using less load. So that's an example of how to use smart assistance work. Or like, you want to get stronger biceps and you're like, oh, you could roll your face off and all this, but at the end of the day, curls work pretty well for strengthening and adding more mass to your bicep, and they don't take too much away from everything else. So that's why, you know, your work should kind of go from, you know, biggest, you know, compound lift or competition style lift, and kind of then the next variation is going to look somewhat similar. So you might do like elevated deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts as a second movement, elevated snatch grip deadlifts, etc. And then it's going to go into something like glute ham raises, hamstring work. It's just going to go down the line, and that's how you should structure your program